As a socialist revolutionary government, what they are doing is providing the security, the stability, and the framework for people to be able to go and be economically productive. And people have seen huge gains in terms of their personal economy, in terms of equality, in terms of equity, but people have been able to participate in society through the gains of the revolution. People don't believe that socialism is when you sit around and receive a free check. They want the ability, they want the right to go out and work and be productive and contribute to a national project and to contribute to their households and communities. They also want the right to development. And we hear a lot of criticisms from the North about the way in which we, as sovereign people of Latin America, the way in which we want to go about our development and the path we want to take. The criticism isn't valid. What's valid is what the people of each country want to do and the path that they want to take and the path that they have instructed their movements and their political parties and their national government to take. And the path that Nicaragua is taking in terms of development is that they are forming and strengthening relations with countries like China by joining the Belt and Road Initiative, by partnering with countries like Russia, like Venezuela, like Iran and Cuba, among others. And Nicaragua is a country that is not isolated, not its government, not its social movements, not its people. Contrary to how the country has been framed as isolated by the media, but the fact is that they are building these ties and they're looking to build even grander infrastructure projects because we, as people of Latin America, have been denied the right. It has been a deliberate system of colonization and imperialism that has been continuous and uninterrupted until these sovereign governments, we have been deprived of the right to development. So it's very important that we support the struggles of each of these countries and these revolutionary projects and the right of people to determine the way in which they want to go about running their policies, their internal policies, their foreign policies, as well as their development without interference from the exterior. We've been seeing regular communiques from the national government and from the ministries having to do with energy and gas in response to the shortages that we're seeing in the world today because of the conflict. The Nicaraguan government is trying to ensure that they take the bulk of the hit and provide subsidies for fuel and gas. In many countries, as we're seeing massive price spikes at the pump, and the Nicaraguan Sandinista government wants to ensure that it's providing subsidies, that the costs in Nicaragua don't harm national production, they don't harm the most vulnerable sectors, they don't harm families, and those low-income producers and campesinos. In addition to this, the World Workers Association has had a very important role in the revolutionary process. It's still now today. Campesinos in Nicaragua, among many other initiatives, are producing their own organic fertilizer. This is extremely important and relevant today because, again, we're seeing a massive shortage in fertilizer. This is really causing a lot of harm to countries like Peru, who weren't able to self-sustain themselves. But because we're seeing these initiatives that started years ago in Nicaragua, they're going to only boost that production. So they have food sovereignty. It's a country that produces the vast majority of its own food. For this reason, it's not going to be affected by the unilateral coercive measures, the sanctions imposed by the United States or any other countries, because it won't need to import food. It will be self-sustaining and producing their own fertilizer and a range of products that we're going to be seeing absence or shortage of during this crisis. The United States has accused this revolutionary government of persecuting its political opponents, but failed to disclose that none of the people who were under investigation at that time were even candidates. They were, at best, pre-candidates for presidency of Nicaragua, just in the way that I'm a pre-candidate for the presidency of France, just the way that you are a pre-candidate for the presidency of Yemen. I confirmed this on 2 different occasions in interviews with the president and magistrates of the Supreme Electoral Council. I conducted interviews both in July 2021, when this inscription process was taking place, and again, just a couple months ago in January of this year in person. None of these approximately 21 individuals, supposedly pre-candidates for the presidency, had inscribed in the electoral process. Rather, this was all part of a plot to delegitimize Nicaragua's political process and the elections within the context in which the Sandinista party remains the largest political force in the country. These opposition figures were investigated for receiving direct financing from government agencies of the United States and Europe. These acts are in violation of the laws that exist in many countries of the world. Foreign agents' laws against treason, against money laundering, against receiving financing for terrorism and destabilization attempts and coups. These crimes are illegal under the laws of the United States. Millions of dollars in foreign money was being funneled into Nicaragua through NGOs to these individuals representing the Nicaraguan oligarchy and was being hidden from the state. It was these sorts of funds that were used to finance the violence and terrorism that we witnessed and which I reported on during 2018, in which the majority of victims of these crimes, of these atrocities, the victims and the people who were murdered were leftists who supported the government. Young people were fed methamphetamine and were paid to carry out violent acts, many of which, like I said, targeted Sandinistas and sympathizers or suspected sympathizers of the Sandinista Liberation Front. And these can only be described as terror attacks. They paralyzed the economy and caused extensive damage to the economy, which has taken years to recover from, all while the foreign media framed these violent actors as students. They were not students. They were not students. And they were not peaceful protesters. I've conducted interviews with victims, with union leaders, and foreigners who were caught in those acts of terror that took place in the streets during those months in 2018. And anyone who reproduces the lies of the corrupt corporate media and the US government on the events of 2018 is an accomplice to the grave violations of human rights committed against the Nicaraguan people. Since 2017, I've dedicated a great deal of my reporting to Venezuela in the different outlets that I've worked in. And what we saw in Nicaragua was an application of the same playbook used in the guarimbas that were used to destabilize Venezuela in 2017 and in prior opportunities. The media strategy used to attack these revolutionary processes has been the same in both countries. The Nicaraguan government is now being attacked by the United States for the crime of enforcing its own laws, guarding its own national sovereignty, and for seeking justice for the victims of the atrocities committed by these US-backed actors. Having covered many countries in Latin America, I believe that the campaign of lies against Nicaragua by the media and the international so-called human rights industry by supposed democracy activists located outside of Nicaragua have made it the most severe case of total lies spread over time against a single country in recent history, with very few voices countering these false narratives. One of the things that I think is really important to highlight within the context of the smear campaign against Nicaragua is, having lived and traveled through many countries and worked in many countries of Latin America and the Americas, and being Central American myself, I think it's very important to highlight that Nicaragua is the safest country in Central America, and it's no coincidence at all. It has the lowest rate of homicide, and though I'm no expert in the strategy to tackle organized crime and drug trafficking, I believe that there is some key overlap and similarities between the effective policies of Nicaragua and those that are adopted here in Bolivia under the movement towards socialism, which have successfully dealt a blow to transnational crime and drug trafficking within its national territory by nationalizing its strategy and employing a holistic approach while expelling the DEA and the US presence, which we know has only contributed to crime throughout all of Latin America.